relations. That itself is already one of the possible risks that Taiwan faces. And then on the second level, we see that Taiwan's largest firms actually produces computer monitors, and they are actually the leaders of manufacturers in the personal computer industry. And the thing that we should really highlight on here is that the end products of Taiwan's exports mostly are finished up in China. So if let's say Taiwan forces its way out of China, we believe that it will anger China, and this would greatly affect their their exports, because they will not be able to sit down. They will not be able to actually produce these goods to actually to be exported, and that we believe will actually greatly affect the economy of Taiwan. And on the second level, right? On the second level, we can see that the biggest importer and exporter of Taiwan is actually China itself. So in 2010, we have seen that China actually accounts for 41.8% of Taiwan's exports. 41.8% is basically it's a huge chunk out of Taiwan's economy. So we believe that if they push for this independence, they will really greatly anger China, right? And it will cause a great damage to the economy of China. Because we can see that Taiwan's economy basically surrounds these exports, and we believe that the fracture of these relations between these two countries will further aggravate the economic situation that we see today. Yes, opening. Okay. All right.
Taiwanese government is exporting and importing the products from China. So what's so problematic about this?
The thing is, okay, yeah, exactly right. Because now the export and import relations is between Taiwan and China. So if let's say China gets angry, China will not give anything to Taiwan, and Taiwan's economy, the export economy will just greatly be affected. And on the next level, right, we can also see that the United States is the third largest trade partner in Taiwan. So we believe that now there's a delicate link between China and US, because China is actually holding US because debt. So if let's say they are separate, right, and they are forced to choose between China and Taiwan, obviously the US would carry out their policies in China's interest, because they want to protect their own economy. And on the second level of defense, right, one of the biggest questions that we have to ask when a country is pushing for independence is whether this country is able to protect itself in terms of internal and external security, right? And we believe that now itself, Taiwan and China relations are being more and more. Taiwan is actually facing a challenge of acquiring foreign military expenses because of a stronger Chinese opposition, right? And on the second level, we must see that most of the weapons that Taiwan gets, the bulk of Taiwan usually buy, most of Taiwan's weapons actually come from the United States. So once again, we analyze that the relationship between China and US now is very fragile. China and US is very interrelated. So if let's say Taiwan pushes for this independence, later on they want to get these weapons from the United States. We believe the United States would actually side China and not supply weapons to Taiwan. So this would be a very dangerous situation for Taiwan, because it would be a new country. It's volatile. It's very vulnerable to the outside conditions, and without this ability to arm themselves, to equip themselves to protect Taiwan itself, we believe that it is going against the very idea of why have a country when you can't even protect yourself. So basically what I've shown you, Mr. Speaker, is how it affects the relationship, the economic relations between China and Taiwan itself, and second of all, how Taiwan is not ready because they will not be able to arm themselves. With that, I'm very proud to propose.
Right, Celia, thanks speaker for her speech, and now we invite the first speaker to closing the
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two mistakes that the whole entire bench is making is as follows. One, they believe somehow that Taiwan is not ready, which is ridiculous when Taiwan is fundamentally capable of making those choices. Two, the entire bench assumes that the right to sovereign right or to pursue formal independence is not an absolute value. We believe it's a fundamental value that every country should possess, anyone, every place, every region should possess. And that underlying principle of independence and the right to sovereign state is what we're going to extend as a second government. Before moving on to our two extensions, firstly about why sovereign right is a fundamental right, not a relative right. And two, how this proposal is going to further oppress people in China in the long run. I'm going to give you 500 rebuttals to the whole entire case. Firstly, they talk about the issue of harm for Taiwan because they're unable to no longer trade with China. One, already under the status quo, there can be an economic trade between China and Taiwan, even in both cases, right? For example, in 2011, Taiwan, China already explicitly agreed with the gradual decreasing of tariffs. So even if you want to export import analysis, which is nothing really new from the closing, can still be done in both paradigms. It's not unique harm. Two, we live in Taiwan, the closing tries to come up with this idea, Taiwan is not ready. Taiwan is obviously ready. It's categorized as four Asian tigers, which is one of the most prominent economic prosperity. Moreover, GDP of Taiwan is increasing 8% daily for decades, ladies and gentlemen. We don't think that Taiwan is not ready is a false analysis of the status quo. You should be reading the news. Third, so we don't think their analysis even stands. And we believe and third of all this, Taiwan can simply trade with other countries, which is necessary, right? Why do you have so uniqueness to only stay with China, right? Again, there's Japan, Singapore, or Malaysia, or other countries they want to trade. It's up to the country to decide. I don't know what you're trying to talk about. No, thank you. Second, they talk about visa. One, we can still guarantee certain economic ties through free trade agreement, or for example, ECFA, which has been signed recently between Taiwan and China. There should be a faster process there, such as how we see case of Japan or United States. Two, the deciding visa itself is our own sovereign rights. I don't know what they're trying to explain. Third of all, they try to say national sentiment is going to be further stronger. One, thus national sentiment, whatever, is already strong under the current paradigm. So I don't know what you're trying to explain between the status quo and aftertime. There's so little difference there. Fourth refutation, the criteria is of independence where there's no oppression. I don't know what they're talking about, right? That every country has a right to pursue independence when necessary. No, thank you. Fifth of all, they try to say that Taiwan's arms would decrease, like Taiwan's not ready to arm itself. One, the United States has strong incentive to back up Taiwan even after taking this proposal, right? It has been selling arms for decades. Two, Taiwan itself uses $8.042 billion of army already under its current paradigm. Taiwan can already self-sufficient. Two, they're using 6.6 million people conscription already under its current paradigm. So Taiwan is absolutely ready. So under extension of how having pursued a sovereign right is a fundamental run. The opening up did a good job explaining how Taiwan has different history and ideology. We say further of three reasons. Firstly, we say the right to sovereign right is fundamental because you're able to decide what policies to take in the future, right? Because your future or your son's or daughter's future can be determined by China. That is ridiculous, right? The thing is, Taiwanese people are the ones who will be most affected and the ones who will be most influenced. So, for example, who do you have economic tie with, or who do you have diplomatic tie, especially concerning the fact that these things are long-term things. We believe that Taiwanese people should have the right to choose who to actually have a trade with. No, thank you. Second, we believe there's a democratic process behind supporting Taiwanese independence. Right? The opening of government said a false analysis saying only small segment of society believes for Taiwan independence. False, ladies and gentlemen. In 1996, Lee Tang-hui, who is the president of Taiwan, explicitly said we want the independence of Taiwan. There's also, secondly, recently, there's more demonstrations being done on streets of Taiwan seeking for independence. More than the majority of people already agrees with independence, right? So according to their logic, as long as there's national consensus, we can allow independence, then they lost their case, right? Because there is a national consensus there. The part why this election has been successful Xi's president, it's because majority of people agreed with independence of Taiwan. So since citizens are the ones who most want, and there has to be democratic process of diet or elections or demonstration, I don't think that China can simply undermine the democratic process. Third reason, we say this is simply unfair because concept of birth lottery, right? Simply because you're born in a certain country, you don't have the right to pursue independence. Just because you're born in Taiwan is not enough reason to deny the right to pursue independence, right? For example, if you were born in other countries such as Japan or United States or any other nations or any other places around the globe, you have the right to decide for independence and pursue independence, but just because you're born in Taiwan, denying that right is not just simply unfair. Go ahead.
What is the standard for international society to ban a state succession from another state?
I've told you 3 reasons why. I don't think you're listening to our speech. So secondly, let's take a look at long-term implications, how this proposal is going to bring about. We say this is going to bring about more independence and oppressions in the long run. When you consider the uniqueness of China, right? Because there, for example, in Tibet or Uyghur, where people are being oppressed daily, where the police is taking them away in the night. We believe that this is simply harmful, and if we allow this we integrate China and Taiwan by oppressing China, China can legitimize its one China policy even further. That legitimacy can be used to further oppress people in Tibet or further oppress people in Uyghur. And they can say, since we allowed for Taiwan, this precedent can be a strong reason to justify further oppressions and further integration. We see this is one step back. All of the effort we have been trying to liberalize these societies, such as awarding like Nobel Peace Prize to Liu Xiaobo and trying to support Dalai Lama. We don't think it's going to set back all those movements. These people have a harder way to have a grand sovereign state or to have even autonomy. Considering the fact that China has invaded Tibet and Uyghur in 1950s, we think that can be further legitimized if we take this proposal, right? Obviously, because they're now trying to invade Taiwan in a sense and make it part again. Even though Tibet and Uyghur has different ethnicity and different religion, such as for Tibet has Tibet Buddhism, which is different from China, they're going to legitimize a further integration or oppression. We think this is rather harmful. So we brought you on the table why sovereign right is a fundamental right. We told you Taiwan's ready. We told you Taiwan has the right. We believe Taiwan is working for independence. That's why we oppose.
Right, thank you, speaker, for the speech, and invite the last speaker to go next.
Mr. Speaker, I found this as a very interesting debate in terms of the relations between China and Taiwan, which is actually quite a very sort of confusing gray area for a lot of people, Mr. Speaker. And in this debate, I've identified 3 main clashes in terms of how it benefits the Taiwanese people, whether they should be independent or not independent officially from China. In terms of democracy and what is democracy, we got a very elaborate explanation from the opposition side of what democracy is, and also how this helps Taiwan economically, militarily, in terms of how they defend themselves, Mr. Speaker. And these are the clashes that I've identified in this debate. But before I move into these clashes, I'd like to go on to my rebuttals first. First, and the speaker before me came and said a lot of things about how the GDP of Taiwan has been growing, how the ECFA is such a beneficial thing to Taiwan, and we completely agree with that, Mr. Speaker, on side government, that this ECFA between Taiwan and China is beneficial to China and to Taiwan indeed, and the main reason why, please sit down, and the main reason why the ECFA has been able to be put put in place is because of the ties between Taiwan and China. Because of the status quo that is in place right now. That is why it's been because basically the ECFA is just to eventually create free trade between Taiwan and China, to reduce the red tape of cutting through, of which you have to navigate your way through, because with two separate states, it becomes more, with Taiwan becoming independent, it becomes more difficult for Taiwan to trade with China. He also talked about undermining the democratic process. Opening government came up and told us that Taiwan will be able to have its own administrative policies, legislation, elections, financial policies, domestic policies, in terms of what we see happening in Hong Kong now, along the same lines of the model in Hong Kong, and opening opposition came up and told us that Hong Kong isn't doing well. Mr. Speaker, Hong Kong is doing very well. That's the reason why the Hang Seng is one of the strongest stock markets in the world. Mr. Speaker, they also came with the long-term implications, and he kept on giving the example of Tibet and oppression. Mr. Speaker, as soon as I landed in Taiwan, everything looked great. I don't see people oppressed. So I feel he's taking that example out of context and also comparing it to Russia and Chechnya. We can't deal with those examples right now, Mr. Speaker, because those things are out of context. The Taiwanese people are doing great, and that is why we can see with their GDP increasing and exports increasing and the like. Before I move on to my clashes, closing.
Okay, how is this long-term implication relevant when your proposal legitimizes and makes a precedent of oppression?
We are not legitimizing oppression. As we said, Taiwan is able to have its own political parties, financial policy. Taiwan is able to just officially carry the banner of them being under China, but in this sense, Taiwan is able to operate in any way. The reason why we want Taiwan to remain under China is to be able to ease these things of trading between the two, Mr. Speaker. My clashes, Mr. Speaker, how this benefits the Taiwanese people economically, how it benefits the Chinese people economically, and how, please sit down, how it benefits these two countries as a whole. Mr. Speaker, both opening and closing government have talked about how Taiwan is able to access the Chinese economy, which is the most populous country in the world. How they have access to the largest market. They have that ease. Not a lot of countries would kill to have the opportunity to be able to have free trade with China, Mr. Speaker. China is such a powerful economy, Mr. Speaker, that they hold 80% of the United States debt, Mr. Speaker. 80% of the world's largest economy. As my extension speaker came up and told us that having a vested interest, Taiwan being one of the largest investors in China, and China being the largest investor in the United States, ties these countries together. So basically what we have here, Mr. Speaker, is a situation of Taiwan having access to the world's two largest economies, because these countries are interrelated. They have this very, very good, very healthy trading relationship, Mr. Speaker. So, on to democracy, and what is democracy, Mr. Speaker? Democracy is, we all know that democracy is a majority game. Basically, the numbers rule, Mr. Speaker. So what the government is saying is that Taiwan having, as mentioned by opening gov, which was not addressed by closing gov, Taiwan having its own elections and political parties and financial policies, the people still get to choose who they want to lead them. They are two distinguished nations in terms of how their systems operate, how their political systems run, and democracy is not being infringed in this way, Mr. Speaker. My extension speaker also came up and told us about how militarily militarily, Taiwan benefits from being tied to China in terms of the fear of aggravating China, because you know, Mr. Speaker, you do not bite the hand that feeds you, Mr. Speaker. You make sure that you keep relations between the two. Side government has identified the problem of having tension between these two countries already. This will only exacerbate the tension in between, in terms of China being angered, China's interests in Taiwan and Taiwan's interests in China. It will become more difficult for the two countries to work together. With that, Mr. Speaker, we're proud to propose.
What we told you from closing is that sovereign right is something fundamental, regardless of religion and regardless of ideology. We believe that because Taiwanese people want democracy and it is their democratic will, we don't think the benefit that they want to show will override this democratic will. In my speech, I'm going to talk about three issues. Firstly, I'm going to look at the benefit that they make this policy, and I'm going to show you why their benefit is essentially nothing. And secondly, I'm going to talk about the principle of rights to pursue independence, which is actually the extension from closing opposition. And thirdly, I'm going to look at the practical harm to other areas who are seeking independence, regions like Tibet and Uyghur. Now, let's look at the benefit that they brought up. First of all, they have been talking about the economic benefit. Opening government talked about there will be economic benefit because this policy removes barriers, and closing talked about export, import, that sort of chat. First of all, what we told you is that there is, no thank you. What we told you is that China and Taiwan are already pursuing economic prosperity together by showing treaties like THBT, thank you, which is essentially a free trade agreement, and they have agreed to gradually reduce the tariff of 800 types of products to the zero at the end of the day. So what we say is that these nations already see the benefit in pursuing economic prosperity together. No, thank you. And the response from government is that, if Taiwan becomes independent, it's going to be difficult. But what we tell you is that, integration in economic level and integration in political level is completely different. We see lots of other sovereign states who are seeking economic integration with other regions, but still sustain their own sovereignty, still sustain the control over, their own population. So what we are saying is that it is completely different. And because these nations, Taiwan has succeeded in agreeing this economic integration without giving up this principle of pursuing independence, this is still, we think their benefit is, their benefit does not stand. Secondly, let's talk about this security of region. We think opening government talked about this proposal brings about benefit in security sense because there will be no tension between Taiwan and China. What we say is that this is actually the opposite, and we believe that what we want the allies, like the United States, who are actually protecting the security of liberal democracy in Asia, East Asian nations, do not like the increasing influence of China. right? And after taking this proposal, what this proposal allows is that China will be able to extend its military base to Taiwan, because Taiwan will be under the control of China. So we believe that given that the recent China's aggressiveness, China has been drastically increasing its military budget. China has been invading disputed territorial areas such as Senkaku Islands and other areas. We don't think. We believe that the United States, thank you, we have to increase more base in this region in order to counter the influence of this China. So because this policy allows the more influence, China, we think this is actually detrimental in a security sense. And what we heard from closing is that that Taiwan is not ready to arm herself. As my partner has already explained, first of all, we believe that Taiwan has certain capability in military, since they are already spending certain budget in buying arms, so they are already arming herself. And moreover, we would say that U.S. is more than ready. U.S. is more than happy to back up Taiwan if it is necessary. Like I said, United States do not like increasing influence China. Go.
Could you please tell us how international community will not be hostile to Taiwan when they are afraid of retaliatory trade measures coming from China?
Look, what we say is that first of all, what we say is that we are not saying that this our case would suddenly achieve the complete independence of Taiwan. But what we are saying is that there is a certain value of Taiwan in upholding this independence in terms of national identity. And this is actually what we want to protect from side opposition. Now let's briefly look at the principle of right to pursue independence.
On that point, sir.
No, thank you. What we said is that this right to pursue independence is something fundamental. Each citizen, regardless of their nation, regardless of where they are born, should be able to decide on their own what policies to take in the future, because these people are the ones who are most affected at the end of the day. And what we heard in response is that these people, Taiwanese people, will still be able to have their own policies, monetary policies and that kind of stuff. First of all, we point out that there are policies, actually Taiwanese people will not able to have on their own, such as diplomatic policy. How can Taiwanese people have different diplomatic policy as China, if Taiwan will be under the control of China. And moreover, what we point out is that China will actually increase the influence, upon Taiwan, because China is claiming one China. We don't think China will suddenly allow. We don't think China will still allow criticism against Chinese government. So such as what we see in Hong Kong or Macau. So we don't think so we believe that freedom of expression is also undermined. Moreover, what is crucially important in today's debate is this policy actually undermines the national identity of Taiwanese people, as what we have been saying. This identity to pursue independence from China is a democratic will of Taiwan. We don't think this policy can neglect this will, and we think this is actually detrimental. Quickly, let's look at the practical harm, the other areas who are seeking independence, like Tibet or Uyghur. Because this policy legitimizes one China policy. This policy essentially says that because China is huge, China is actually a huge nation. You shouldn't offend China, and you shouldn't have tension with China. This policy actually sets back this movement towards independence of these areas by legitimizing this one China policy, by legitimizing increasing influence of China. This policy affects the movement not only in the domestic level but also in the international level as well. Thank you.